3 charter buses growled through the back easement of my property at 2 a.m., spewing out 300 drunk college kids like a plague of entitled locusts straight into my late wife's memorial garden. And directing traffic in her designer silk robe and pearl earrings was none other than Delilah de Worthington, the self-crowned HOA queen of Willowbrook Estates, pointing manicured nails at my heirloom roses like she was conducting a symphony of suburban spite. "Really stomp those ugly lavender patches, darlings," she trilled in that fake sweet voice that could curdle milk. "We need better curb appeal around here." The sickening crunch of snapped irrigation pipes mixed with the stench of spilled beer and crushed herbs. My therapy garden, the one place where I could still feel close to Emily after the cancer took her, was being turned into a frat house war zone. While Dee smirked from the sidelines, convinced she'd finally broken the quiet veteran next door, I was already mentally cataloging every second of evidence. Because this entitled HOA Karen had just handed a retired Army logistics officer the perfect weapon to dismantle her entire fake kingdom. My name is Derek Harlan. At 54, after 25 years hauling supplies through war zones that made suburban Texas look like a vacation, I thought I'd earned some peace planting lavender and tending Emily's roses at sunrise. The HOA, they warned me it existed. I laughed. I'd survived worse than clipboard warriors. Famous last words. It started innocently enough. 6 months after I closed on the corner lot in Willowbrook Estates, I was out at dawn with my coffee, hands deep in that rich black soil, watching the first lavender shoots push through. Emily and I had dreamed of this exact garden during her last round of chemo: rows of heirloom tomatoes for fresh salsa, butterfly bushes for the pollinators she loved, and that climbing rose bed right where the morning light hit longest. The realtor had muttered something about covenants, but I figured after Fallujah, a few rules about lawn height couldn't touch me. Week 1, I had 4 raised beds installed when Dee's gleaming white Range Rover glided up like a shark smelling blood. Out she stepped in tennis whites, clipboard clutched like a medieval mace. "Excuse me, Mr. Harlan," she announced without so much as a hello. "Are you establishing some sort of agricultural operation here?" I wiped dirt off my hands and smiled the polite smile I'd perfected with supply sergeants. "Just vegetables and flowers, ma'am. Doctor's orders for PTSD. Therapy garden." Her microbladed eyebrows shot up so fast I thought they'd achieve orbit. "Well, you'll need architectural committee approval for any permanent structures. We have strict covenants about maintaining proper residential aesthetics. Visible produce is simply not allowed." I was polite. That was my first mistake. "I'll review the guidelines. Thanks." 3 days later, certified mail. Violation notice. $100 fine for non-decorative plant species visible from the public right-of-way. Non-decorative. My Emily's roses. The same soft pink climber she'd circled in catalogs while hooked up to IVs. I stared at that letter for a long time, the paper shaking slightly in my hands. Not from anger yet, but from the sheer ridiculousness of it. Time for reconnaissance. 2 days at the county courthouse pulling deeds, surveys, original covenants. Jackpot. My lot predated their 2021 amendments by 3 months. I was grandfathered from most of their nonsense, including the produce must be hidden rule. I responded with documentation, respectful tone, attached legal proof. Case closed. Or so I thought. Dee doubled down immediately. More certified letters. Board meeting ambushes. Anonymous tips to the city about excessive water usage and pest harborage. Her Range Rover started cruising past twice a day, slowing like a predator scoping prey. The truth came out during a fence line chat with sweet old Mrs. Alvarez next door, who slipped me tomatoes from her own secret patch. "Dee says your garden is hurting her sale price," she whispered, glancing around like the trees had ears. "She's been trying to unload that McMansion for months. Buyers keep asking about the farm situation." The farm situation. 6 raised beds and some roses apparently constituted agricultural terrorism. Suddenly it clicked. This wasn't about aesthetics or covenants. This was pure, desperate economics. One entitled queen watching her investment threatened by a veteran growing his own food. The gritty smell of her panic was almost as strong as my morning coffee. She wanted war with someone who'd survived 3 combat tours. Bring it on, princess. 2 weeks later, she dropped the nuclear option. I was watering the roses Tuesday morning when my phone buzzed, certified mail. 14 separate violation notices. This psycho had spent her weekend prowling my property with a measuring tape and a personal vendetta. Unapproved fence height. My chain link met county standards. Commercial scale gardening operation. 6 beds, not 6 acres. Pest attraction potential. Code for I hate vegetables and the veteran who grows them. Total. $1,400 in fines. 30 days to pay or face lien proceedings. She was threatening to steal my house over tomatoes and therapy lavender. Game on. First rule of logistics warfare. Know your enemy's weaknesses better than they know their strengths. I spent that afternoon deep in public records. Property permits, zoning applications, HOA filings. Everything is public if you know where to look. Jackpot number 1. Dee built her precious Infinity Edge pool deck in 2022 without architectural committee approval. The same approval she demanded for my vegetable beds. Jackpot number 2. Her hedge fund husband runs wellness coaching sessions from their home office, direct violation of residential zoning. Crown jewel. Her Instagram famous koi pond extends 18 inches onto HOA common property. Unauthorized encroachment. The irony tasted sweeter than my homegrown strawberries. I filed formal complaints using her exact pompous language. Every technical violation, every bureaucratic phrase thrown back at her with military precision. Then I requested an emergency board meeting to address the president's documented pattern of selective enforcement. The delicious mini twist? She had to preside over her own disciplinary hearing. 3 days later, community center conference room. Fluorescent lights buzzing like angry hornets. The acid smell of burnt coffee mixed with Dee's overpowering gardenia perfume. 5 board members fidgeting. I arrived with my evidence binder. Dee clutched her designer purse like body armor. This is clearly retaliatory harassment, she announced before anyone else spoke. I smiled calmly. Ma'am, I'm using your exact citation language from my violations. If documenting rule violations is harassment, what exactly would you call your 14 notices? Board member Janet Rivera shifted uncomfortably. Delilah, did you actually measure his fence? Of course I did. It's obviously over regulation height. I slid the county surveyor's report across the table. 6 feet 2 inches. County standard. Here's the original permit. The room went silent except for the angry hornet lights. What about his commercial farming operation? Dee pressed, desperation creeping into her voice. 6 raised beds, total footprint 240 square feet, I said, opening the covenant book to the exact page. Section 4.7 subsection C permits up to 500 square feet of landscaping modifications without approval. Would you like me to read it aloud? Board member Mike Torres cleared his throat. Delilah, have you reviewed the actual covenant language you've been citing? The silence stretched like piano wire. I could smell Dee's panic sweat competing with her perfume as she realized she'd walked into a perfectly laid trap. This is ridiculous, she finally exploded. I'm protecting property values while he turns our neighborhood into some agricultural wasteland. Ma'am, I said, voice steady, I'm growing food for personal use and planting flowers for my late wife. You built unpermitted structures and run an unlicensed business from your residence. That's when Janet pulled out her own folder. Other board members had been doing homework too. Delilah, we received your husband's retroactive business permit application yesterday. Backdated to 2021. Why are we only seeing this now? Dee's face went whiter than her Range Rover. I moved to suspend all violation proceedings against Mr. Harlan pending comprehensive compliance review, Mike announced. Seconded, Janet said quickly. Dee shot up so fast her chair shrieked. This is mutiny. I packed my binder calmly. Ma'am, this is accountability. She fled like her heels were on fire. Dee's next move came disguised as concerned citizenship, because nothing screams good neighbor like weaponizing city bureaucracy. I was deadheading Emily's roses Thursday morning when the doorbell rang. City code enforcement officer stood there looking like he'd rather be getting a root canal. Behind him, Dee's white Range Rover lurked at the curb like a shark circling wounded prey. Mr. Harlan. Officer Ramirez. We received some complaints about zoning violations. Mind if I look around? Of course she did. Princess D had escalated from HOA harassment to full government deployment. What kind of violations? I asked, though I already knew this would be peak suburban insanity. He consulted his clipboard with the enthusiasm of a man reading his own obituary. Agricultural business operations in a residential zone, excessive commercial traffic, health code violations related to food production. I actually laughed. This woman thought my 6 tomato plants constituted an agribusiness. Next, she'd probably report me to the FDA for unlicensed salsa production. Officer, I'm happy to show you around, but who filed these complaints? Anonymous tip through our hotline. Behind him, Mrs. Alvarez's curtain twitched. The whole neighborhood was getting free entertainment courtesy of Dee's mental breakdown. That's when it hit me, this wasn't random. Dee was building an official paper trail, creating a bureaucratic record of my supposed violations. Diabolical in a suburban housewife kind of way. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She didn't know that my old supply sergeant buddy Jake had taught me about public records during poker nights. You can request copies of all complaints filed against your property, including contact information, unless they filed anonymously. Government transparency works both ways. Officer Ramirez, I said as we walked toward my allegedly illegal empire, I'd like to file a public records request for all complaints against this address in the past year. Also need complaint history for 1422 Magnolia Lane. His face went pale. That's not typical. Neither are anonymous tips about imaginary farming operations, but here we are. While Ramirez inspected my tomatoes like they might launch an insurrection, I was calculating angles. Dee's complaint pattern would expose her harassment campaign. Better yet, I could investigate whatever skeleton she'd been hiding in her perfectly manicured closet. 20 minutes later, Ramirez finished. Irrigation compliant, garden scale residential, pest management professional grade. Commercial traffic non-existent. Sir, I don't see violations here. Your setup's cleaner than most restaurants. Excellent. When's that written report coming? The panic flash across his face was priceless. Dee had probably sold this as routine harassment, not legitimate inspection requiring actual documentation. I'll file it this week. Perfect. I'd collect copies Friday along with those public records. His truck barely cleared my driveway before Dee's Range Rover vanished. Smart hovering during your revenge plot is amateur hour. Defense was boring. Time for offense. That afternoon, City Hall became my intelligence headquarters. The records clerk, a sweet lady who'd started recognizing my weekly visits, pulled up the complaint database with growing fascination. Mr. Harlan, you've got 7 complaints in 2 months. Same phone number every time. She squinted at her screen. Honey, that's obsessive. What other addresses has that number targeted? Her expression shifted from helpful clerk to fellow conspiracy theorist. This number filed 49 complaints in 6 months. Same properties repeatedly. Someone's turned harassment into a hobby. 49 complaints. Dee wasn't just targeting me. She was conducting psychological warfare against the entire neighborhood through bureaucratic terrorism. The real gold mine was pulling up 1422 Magnolia Lane. Well, isn't this interesting? The clerk murmured. No permits for that pool deck edition. Pool permit expired 2022 but shows active use. Business license filed yesterday, backdated to 2021. She grinned conspiratorially. Somebody's been scrambling. The smell of Dee's desperation practically wafted off those hastily submitted papers like cheap perfume mixed with flop sweat. Rosa. What happens when someone abuses the complaint system? Harassment by process, misdemeanor charge, possible fines. She leaned closer. Officer Ramirez told his supervisor about this case. They don't appreciate being used as weapons in neighbor wars. Music to my ears. I remembered reading about this in one of those legal blogs I'd been devouring. When someone repeatedly files false or frivolous complaints to harass another person, it becomes criminal behavior regardless of their intentions. I left City Hall with ammunition. Every complaint Dee filed, documentation of her violations, and the phone number linking all her anonymous tips. The satisfying crunch of gravel under my boots sounded like victory marching across that parking lot. That evening I drafted a formal harassment complaint to the city manager, attached evidence of Dee's systematic abuse of city resources, and requested investigation into malicious use of government services. The predator was about to discover she'd been hunting a bigger predator, and Princess Dee had no clue what was stalking her. 1 week later, Dee played her nuclear card, an emergency HOA board meeting with my property as ground zero. The certified notice arrived Monday, scheduling the meeting for Thursday evening. Emergency resolution regarding immediate health and safety violations at 2718 Oak Ridge Drive. The woman had officially declared war on my tomatoes. I could smell her desperation from 3 blocks away, like burnt coffee mixed with expensive perfume in pure panic. My public records requests had clearly rattled her cage, and cornered animals do stupid things. Thursday night, community center conference room. Same buzzing fluorescent lights, same burnt coffee stench, but this time the energy felt different. Dee sat at the head table like she was presiding over my execution, wearing her power suit and that smug expression that screamed checkmate. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we're here to address an escalating situation that threatens our entire community's health and safety. Mr. Harlan's unauthorized agricultural operation has created standing water hazards, attracted rodents and insects, and decreased property values throughout the neighborhood. The board has no choice but to impose an immediate lien of $3,800 plus attorney fees." There it was, the twist I'd been expecting. She wasn't just escalating complaints anymore. She was trying to financially destroy me through emergency powers she probably didn't even possess. But here's where all those late-night research sessions paid off. I'd spent the weekend reading every HOA law blog I could find and learned something crucial. Emergency powers require actual emergencies, not manufactured ones. Board members also have fiduciary duties to all homeowners, meaning they can't just steamroll residents without due process. "Ma'am," I said, standing slowly, "before this board votes on anything, I'd like to present some evidence." Her perfectly penciled eyebrows shot up. "This isn't a trial, Mr. Harlan. The board has already reviewed the situation." "Have they reviewed this?" I pulled out my first bombshell. The city inspector's written report clearing my property of all violations. Official findings. No health hazards, no zoning violations, no safety concerns. Janet Rivera reached for the document. "Delilah, did you see this report before calling tonight's meeting?" The silence stretched like piano wire. Dee's face was turning an interesting shade of pink that clashed with her blonde highlights. "I have additional evidence," I continued, pulling out my second bombshell. "Documentation showing Mrs. Worthington owes $52,000 in unpaid HOA dues through her husband's business operations." The room went dead silent except for the angry hornet lights. Mike Torres leaned forward. "Delilah, is this accurate?" That's irrelevant," she sputtered. "We're here about his violations." "Actually," I said, consulting my notes like I was reading a grocery list, Texas Property Code requires board members to be current on all assessments before voting on liens against other homeowners. Voting while owing money constitutes breach of fiduciary duty. I'd memorized that statute after finding it buried in Jake's legal databases. Amazing how many HOA board members don't know their own legal obligations. The other board members were exchanging those looks you see in disaster movies right before someone suggests evacuating. "Furthermore," I continued, "I have documentation of Mrs. Worthington's pattern of harassment through false city complaints, unauthorized surveillance of my property, and selective enforcement of HOA covenants." Janet was reading the city inspector's report with growing amazement. "Delilah, according to this, his property is actually above residential standards. Why are we discussing emergency action?" That's when Dee completely lost it. "Because he doesn't belong here," she screamed, her carefully constructed facade cracking like cheap paint. "This is a respectable neighborhood, not some military housing project. His kind brings down property values with their government mentality and agricultural nonsense." His kind. Government mentality. The mask had finally slipped and everybody in that room heard her true feelings about veterans. The silence that followed was deafening. You could practically hear her social standing crumbling like stale crackers. Board member Dennis Walsh, retired cop I'd barely spoken to, cleared his throat. Mrs. Worthington, did you just make discriminatory statements about military service members? Mike was already reaching for his phone. I'm recording this meeting for HOA records. Those comments are now part of official minutes. Dee's husband, who'd been sitting quietly in the back, stood up with the expression of a man watching his wife commit social suicide in real time. Delilah, we need to go now. I'm not finished, she shrieked, but her hedge fund husband was already dragging her toward the exit. Mrs. Worthington, Janet called after her. The board will be discussing your resignation at our next meeting. The door slammed behind them with the finality of a coffin lid closing. I packed my binder as the remaining board members huddled in emergency session. Through the window I watched Dee's Range Rover peel out of the parking lot like she was fleeing a crime scene, which in many ways she was. Friday morning brought the call that changed everything. Jake Morrison, my old supply sergeant turned attorney, phoned while I was enjoying coffee and the sweet sound of Dee's social media silence. She'd gone dark after Thursday's meltdown, probably on damage control with a crisis management consultant. Tank, you need to hear this, Jake said without preamble. I've been digging through your HOA documents and I found something beautiful. Remember that utility easement behind your property? Of course I remembered. 20-foot strip running along my back fence line. Part of the original subdivision plat, standard utility access never used for anything except the occasional repair truck. What about it? Check out Amendment 47B from the 2021 Covenant Revisions. HOA claims right to temporarily utilize any common areas or designated easements for community events and gatherings. The pieces clicked together like a rifle bolt sliding into battery. She was planning something for that easement. Gets better, Jake continued. I cross-referenced with county records. Your property is accessible through that easement without touching private driveways. Technically legal access for community events. My blood chilled as the full scope of Dee's plan crystallized. She couldn't attack me through normal channels anymore. City complaints failed. Board meeting backfired. Harassment documented. But she'd found a loophole buried in HOA fine print. Jake, what constitutes a community event under that clause? That's the beautiful part. It's deliberately vague. Could be anything from a block party to, he paused meaningfully, a community appreciation gathering with invited guests. Invited guests. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth as I processed the implications. There's more, Tank. Mrs. Alvarez called my office this morning. She overheard Dee on her back patio yesterday talking to someone about weekend plans and teaching that military man a lesson he'll never forget. Mentioned something about friends in the event planning business. And 7 buses should be enough. 7 buses. My coffee cup hit the kitchen counter with a ceramic clink that sounded like artillery in the sudden silence. She's going to flood my property with people. That's my read. But here's the catch. Even with easement access, she still needs 30-day written notice for any community event, plus specific details about nature, duration, and expected attendance. I've checked your mail and HOA records. No notice filed. I was already moving toward my security camera system, mind racing through defensive preparations. What's the legal exposure if she does this without proper notice? Criminal trespass if she exceeds easement boundaries. Property damage liability. If you can prove malicious intent, harassment charges stick. But Tank, Jake's voice grew serious. You need to let it happen. Come again. If you stop her beforehand, it's just another HOA dispute. If you let her commit to this plan and document everything, it becomes criminal behavior with witnesses. She's about to hand you a nuclear weapon wrapped in a bow. The genius of it hit me like lightning. Dee thought she'd found the perfect revenge, using HOA authority to authorize a party that would destroy my property and sanity. But she'd gotten so focused on the attack, she'd forgotten about legal requirements and documentation. I thought about Emily's rose garden directly in the path of any easement access, the memorial bench where I sat every morning with coffee remembering better times. If Dee wanted to violate that sacred space, she'd do it over my dead body. But Jake was right. Better to let her dig her own grave. What do I need to document this properly? Everything. Audio, video, witness statements, property damage assessment. I'm drafting emergency restraining order paperwork now, plus criminal complaints for harassment and property destruction. When she pulls this stunt, we'll have her dead to rights. After hanging up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the easement through my window. Dee had found what she thought was checkmate, legal access to destroy my peace without technically trespassing. She had no idea she was walking into the trap of her lifetime. Time to prepare for war. Saturday morning, War Council convened in my kitchen. Jake arrived first, carrying a briefcase full of legal ammunition, and the grim expression of someone who'd seen too many good people steamrolled by petty tyrants. Maria Torres, my neighbor and civil engineer, came bearing property surveys and a thermos of coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Mrs. Alvarez shuffled over with homemade cookies in the kind of righteous anger that only sweet old ladies can properly weaponize. All right, team, I said, spreading Jake's legal documents across my kitchen table. Princess Dee thinks she's found checkmate. Let's show her what real strategy looks like. Jake opened his briefcase with the precision of a surgeon. First things first, criminal law trumps HOA authority every single time. She can claim easement rights all she wants, but property damage, harassment, and unlawful assembly are still crimes. Maria unrolled her detailed property survey, pointing to the easement boundaries with engineering precision. Tank, this 20-foot strip is all she can legally access. Anything beyond these markers becomes criminal trespass, regardless of what her HOA documents claim. I'd learned this principle during my intelligence training. When the enemy thinks they have perfect cover, that's when they make their biggest mistakes. Dee's confidence in her legal loophole would make her careless about actual boundaries. What's our documentation strategy? I asked, already knowing we needed overwhelming evidence. Jake pulled out a checklist that would make a marine logistics officer weep with joy. Multiple camera angles covering all potential party areas. Audio recording devices in weatherproof housings. Time-stamped photographs of property condition before, during, and after. Witness statements from neighbors. Official complaints filed with county sheriff before the event happens. Mrs. Alvarez leaned forward conspiratorially. I've been talking to the other ladies. Betty Rivera, Dorothy Walsh. Even that new couple on Elm Street. Nobody likes what Dee's been doing to you, honey. We're all willing to testify. This was gold. Community support would destroy any narrative about me being the problem neighbor. Maria spread out her engineering drawings like battle plans. I've documented every sprinkler head, every plant, every structure that could be damaged. We'll have before and after proof of any destruction down to the square inch. Jake nodded approvingly. Insurance won't cover criminal acts by HOA board members. Any damage comes out of Dee's personal assets, not community funds. Hit someone in the wallet hard enough, and they remember the lesson forever. I remembered reading about this during my late-night legal research binges. When HOA board members exceed their authority for personal vendettas, they lose the protection of community insurance. Dee was about to discover that revenge has a price tag. What about the party logistics? I asked. How's she planning to get people here? Mrs. Alvarez's eyes lit up. Oh, I know about that. My cleaning lady works for 3 families in this neighborhood, including the Worthingtons. Dee hired some college party promotion service. The kind that specializes in problem locations where normal venues won't work. Problem locations? Maria repeated with disgust. She literally hired professionals to trash your property. Jake was taking notes furiously. That establishes premeditation and malicious intent. Criminal charges stick when you can prove someone planned to cause damage. The pieces were falling into place like a perfectly executed military operation. Dee thought she was hiring party planners. Actually, she was hiring witnesses to her own criminal conspiracy. I've got contacts in the sheriff's department, Jake continued. They're not fond of being used as cleanup crews for HOA disputes, but they take property crimes seriously. When this goes down, response time will be fast. I felt that familiar pre-mission calm settling over me. The mental state where chaos becomes manageable and victory becomes inevitable. Equipment check. Maria. Cameras, 6 units with night vision, audio recording and battery backup systems. All weatherproof, all positioned to cover easement boundaries and my memorial garden. Mrs. Alvarez. Neighborhood intelligence. Phone tree established. Everyone's got my number and 911 on speed dial. Betty's grandson is home from college this weekend. He's good with that social media stuff if we need video posted immediately. Jake. Legal preparation. Emergency restraining order paperwork ready for filing. Criminal complaints drafted for harassment, property damage, and unlawful assembly. Civil lawsuit prepared for personal damages. He'd be on standby all weekend. The smell of Mrs. Alvarez's chocolate chip cookies mixed with the aroma of Maria's industrial-strength coffee, creating an oddly comforting backdrop to our war planning. These people barely knew me 6 months ago. Now they were willing to spend their weekend helping me fight a psychotic HOA president. One more thing, Jake said quietly. Tank, you need to stay calm when this happens. Document everything but don't engage. Let her commit to the plan completely before authorities arrive. I nodded, thinking about Emily's roses and the memorial bench she'd never see completed. Dee wanted to play war games with an Army logistics veteran. Game on, princess. Let's see what you're really made of. Monday morning brought Dee's official declaration of war disguised as community spirit. The HOA notice appeared in every mailbox like a virus spreading through the subdivision. Community appreciation gathering. Saturday evening 8 p.m. Until late. Join us in celebrating neighborhood unity. Location: Oak Ridge Commons area. Mr. Harlan has graciously agreed to host this special community event showcasing our shared outdoor spaces. I stared at that notice over my morning coffee, admiring the psychological warfare. She twisted my upcoming humiliation into my apparent cooperation, making it impossible for me to object without looking like I was backing out of my own party. Diabolical. I had to respect the strategy even as I planned to destroy it. Jake called within the hour. Saw the notice. She's good. Positioning this as your event means any complaints make you look unstable. But she's also committed in writing to a specific date and claim of authorization. No takebacks now. The mini twist hit me Tuesday when Maria Torres knocked on my door with intelligence that changed everything. Her cleaning lady source had struck gold during Monday's shift at the Worthington mansion. Tank, you need to hear this, Maria whispered, glancing around like we were planning a coup. Dee didn't hire party planners. She hired party promoters, the kind that specialize in college rakers at problem properties. They get paid per busload of kids they deliver. My blood chilled. How many buses? 7 confirmed. Maybe more if the first batch performs well. She's paying $2,000 base plus $100 per bus over 5. The promoter told his crew this was revenge entertainment. Maximum impact on the property owner. Revenge entertainment. This woman had weaponized party promotion against a veteran's memorial garden. The intelligence kept flowing. Wednesday, Mrs. Alvarez reported overhearing Dee coaching her husband on their story. Property damage would be unforeseeable vandalism by outside parties. The HOA had proper authorization and Tank was clearly mentally unstable if he complained about his own community event. They were building a narrative to gaslight me even as they destroyed my property. Thursday brought the sabotage attempts. First, a mysterious complaint to the power company about unsafe electrical usage at my address, clearly trying to get my electricity shut off before the party. I'd learned from my military days to always have backup power, so my generator was fueled and ready. Next came an anonymous report to the water department about potential irrigation system hazards. The inspector arrived Friday afternoon, looked at my perfectly maintained sprinkler setup, and shook his head in disgust. Sir, someone's been filing a lot of complaints about your property. All cleared, all legitimate maintenance. Seems like harassment to me. Would you be willing to put that opinion in writing? I asked. His grin told me everything. Already did. Good luck with whatever's going on here. Friday evening, the diesel smell hit my neighborhood like an invading army. Charter buses were doing reconnaissance runs. Drivers familiarizing themselves with routes to my back fence line. The rumble of their engines mixed with the scent of exhaust and impending chaos. I activated my security system, checked camera angles, and called Jake for final legal confirmation. Everything's in place, he assured me. County Sheriff's Office is aware of potential large disturbance at your address tomorrow night. Code enforcement is on standby for unpermitted event violations. Property damage assessor is scheduled for Sunday morning. But the real intelligence coup came from Mrs. Alvarez's grandson, that college kid who'd been monitoring social media. He knocked on my door Friday night with printouts that made my jaw drop. Mr. Harlan, check this out. The party promoter's been advertising your address on college apps. Epic outdoor rager. Bring your crew. Free buses. Party till dawn. It's gone viral on campus. 300 confirmed attendees, maybe more. Dee hadn't just planned to embarrass me with a neighborhood gathering. She'd orchestrated a full-scale invasion designed to destroy my property and drive me from the community. I sat in my kitchen that Friday night, looking through my window at Emily's memorial roses swaying gently in the evening breeze. Tomorrow night, drunk college kids would trample the garden we'd planned together, destroy the bench I'd built in her memory, desecrate the only physical reminder of our shared dreams. The rage burned cold and clean in my chest. Not the hot fury that makes men stupid, but the calculated anger that makes veterans lethal. Dee thought she was orchestrating my destruction. She had no idea she was about to commit career suicide in front of hundreds of witnesses, with every moment documented for criminal prosecution. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. Let's see how community appreciation looks when it involves criminal charges and personal bankruptcy. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and this time there'd be no escape. Saturday evening arrived like Judgment Day, wrapped in diesel exhaust and bass-heavy music. The first charter bus rumbled down Oak Ridge Drive at 7:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the official start time. I watched from my kitchen window as confused college kids stumbled off, clutching red Solo cups and looking around like they'd been dropped on an alien planet. "Where's the party?" I heard one kid ask his buddy as they wandered toward my fence line. That's when Dee made her grand entrance. Her white Range Rover pulled up like she was arriving at a movie premiere. Windows down, designer sunglasses despite the evening hour. She stepped out wearing what I can only describe as suburban mom tries to be cool. Skinny jeans, bedazzled tank top, and enough jewelry to stock a small boutique. The mini twist unfolded in real time as I watched through my security cameras. Dee wasn't just observing her revenge plot. She was directing it like some demented symphony conductor. "Welcome to our community appreciation event," she announced to the growing crowd of college kids. "Feel free to enjoy all the outdoor space, especially that lovely garden area behind the fence. My memorial garden." She was literally pointing drunk strangers toward Emily's roses. Bus number 2 arrived as I activated my recording system. The smell of spilled beer mixed with my fertilizer created an aroma that would haunt my nightmares. Young voices echoed across what used to be my peaceful neighborhood, turning my therapeutic sanctuary into a carnival from hell. Mrs. Alvarez's curtains twitched as she began her documentation duties. Mike Torres emerged from his house with a camera. Maria positioned herself on her back deck with a clear view of property boundaries. My allies were in position. Bus number 3 brought the music equipment, portable speakers that immediately began blasting bass so loud my windows vibrated. The metallic taste of adrenaline flooded my mouth as I realized Dee wasn't planning a party. She was orchestrating psychological warfare designed to drive me to a breakdown. By 8:15 p.m., all 7 buses had arrived. Nearly 300 college kids swarmed my neighborhood like locusts, following Dee's directions toward the community garden space and that nice outdoor area behind the property line. I stayed hidden, documenting everything while my heart broke watching strangers trample through Emily's memorial space. Beer cans crushed my newly planted marigolds. Someone set up beer pong on the memorial bench I'd built with my own hands. A group of kids started pulling irrigation pipes from the ground like they were harvesting some kind of crop. The property destruction was systematic and devastating, but I forced myself to remain calm. Every moment was being recorded. Every act of vandalism was building my criminal case. 9:45 p.m. Brought the cavalry. 2 county sheriff deputies responding to noise complaints from half the neighborhood. I watched through my window as they approached Dee, who immediately launched into her prepared performance. "Officers, this is just a community event authorized by our homeowners association," she said, gesturing toward the chaos behind my fence like it was a church picnic. "We're using the designated easement area for neighborhood unity activities." Deputy Martinez, recognizing him from community events, looked skeptical as he surveyed the destruction. "Ma'am, do you have permits for an event this size?" That's when Dee's mask slipped just enough to reveal the panic underneath. "It's a private HOA gathering. We don't need permits for community activities." Wrong answer. I'd researched this extensively. Any gathering over 50 people on residential property requires county permits regardless of who's hosting. I stepped onto my front porch with my evidence folder, approaching the deputies with military bearing and civilian politeness. "Officers, I'm Derek Harlan. This is my property and I need to report criminal trespass and property damage." Dee's face went white as I handed Deputy Martinez my documentation packet, property survey showing easement boundaries, security footage of kids destroying my garden outside those boundaries, audio recordings of Dee directing them to my memorial space. "Ma'am," Deputy Martinez said after reviewing my evidence, "these partygoers are clearly exceeding easement access. That constitutes trespass on private property." "But the HOA authorized," Dee started. "The HOA doesn't override criminal law," Deputy Martinez interrupted. "And according to these recordings, you directed people to damage his memorial garden specifically." That's when her hedge fund husband emerged from the crowd looking like a man who just realized his wife had committed social suicide in front of 300 witnesses. "Officers, my wife may have gotten carried away," he said, shooting Dee a look that could freeze lava. "We're happy to shut this down immediately." Too late. I documented everything needed for criminal prosecution. As the buses loaded confused and angry college kids, Deputy Martinez handed Dee a citation for hosting an unpermitted event and informed her that criminal charges were pending review by the district attorney's office. The revolution had begun and Princess Dee had just fired the shot that would destroy her own empire. Sunday morning brought the aftermath that would define Dee's downfall. The county damage assessor arrived at 9 a.m. Sharp, clipboard in hand, ready to document what looked like a natural disaster had swept through my backyard. Emily's Memorial Rose Garden trampled into muddy destruction. My irrigation system ripped apart like confetti. The memorial bench I'd built with my own hands carved with obscenities and stained with beer. Total damage: $9,200. But the emotional devastation? Priceless evidence for criminal court. By Sunday afternoon, the story had exploded across local media. Channel 7 News arrived first, followed by 2 newspapers and a blogger who specialized in HOA horror stories. Dee barricaded herself inside her mansion like a fugitive, but I welcomed every interview request with military precision. "This wasn't a party," I told the cameras, standing beside my destroyed memorial garden. "This was revenge disguised as community spirit, executed by someone who couldn't stand that a veteran was living peacefully next door." The real fireworks came Sunday evening at the emergency HOA board meeting. Community center packed beyond capacity, standing room only with overflow crowds spilling into the parking lot. Local news cameras rolling. Dee arrived with a new attorney, her husband's colleague, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Board President Janet Rivera, who'd replaced Dee after Thursday's meltdown, called for order as residents filed in carrying signs, "Support tank, veterans deserve better," and my personal favorite, "Dee's got to go." I entered with Jake, Maria, Mrs. Alvarez, and a folder of evidence thick enough to stop bullets. The crowd erupted in applause, my neighbors standing and clapping like I'd just won the Medal of Honor. Dee sat in the front row with her husband, looking like she was attending her own funeral. "Before we begin," Janet announced, I want everyone to know this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on our community website. Smart move. Complete transparency meant no backroom deals or cover-ups. Jake presented our evidence methodically. Audio recordings of Dee directing partygoers to my memorial garden, video footage of systematic property destruction, documentation of her pattern of harassment spanning months. The room grew quieter with each revelation until you could hear people breathing. Then came the community witness testimony. Mrs. Alvarez stood first, her sweet grandmother voice carrying moral authority that silenced the room. I've lived in this neighborhood 40 years. Never seen anyone treated with such cruelty as Dee showed this veteran. She tried to destroy his therapy garden, the one he planted for his late wife. Mike Torres followed. Then Maria. Then elderly Mrs. Rivera with her walker. One by one, neighbors testified about Dee's threats, her surveillance, her promises to make my life hell until I moved away. The pattern emerged like a masterpiece of malice. Systematic harassment, discriminatory language about veterans, abuse of HOA authority for personal vendettas. That's when Dee's attorney tried damage control. My client made some regrettable decisions, but this was clearly a community event that got out of hand. No malicious intent can be proven. Wrong courtroom, wrong audience, wrong evidence. I stood slowly, feeling 300 pairs of eyes on me, and delivered the mic drop moment that would end Delilah Worthington's reign of suburban terror forever. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying the command presence of 25 years in the Army, I want everyone to hear exactly what Mrs. Worthington said when she directed those college kids to my property. I pressed play on my audio recorder, and Dee's voice filled the community center with crystal clarity. Use that pretty garden area too. Really trash it good. That military man needs to learn his place in this neighborhood. The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in the parking lot. Dee's face had gone from pale to green. Her husband buried his head in his hands. Her attorney looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Ma'am, I continued, my voice steady as granite, you paid someone to destroy my late wife's memorial garden because you couldn't stand having a veteran in your neighborhood. That recording is now evidence in your criminal trial. The crowd erupted, not applause, raw fury. 300 neighbors who'd finally heard the truth about their HOA president's character. Janet called for order, but the damage was complete and irreversible. The board voted unanimously to remove Delilah Worthington from all HOA positions effective immediately, Janet announced over the crowd noise. We also vote to refer this matter to our insurance company and recommend criminal prosecution. Dee tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to maintain some shred of dignity as her world collapsed in real time. But her microphone had been turned off, her authority stripped away, her reputation destroyed by her own recorded words. She fled the meeting like her designer heels were on fire, her husband trailing behind with the defeated posture of a man whose wife had just committed social murder-suicide on live television. Through the community center windows I watched her white Range Rover screech out of the parking lot for the last time. The Queen was dead. Long live the community. Monday morning brought the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. Silence from 1422 Magnolia Lane. Dee's white Range Rover was gone. Moving trucks arrived Tuesday. By Wednesday the for sale sign went up with motivated seller, plastered across it like a surrender flag. Princess Dee had abdicated her throne and fled the kingdom she tried so hard to rule. The criminal charges came through Thursday: harassment, criminal mischief, and fraudulent use of authority. Dee's mugshot made the evening news, completing her transformation from HOA dictator to convicted felon. The judge sentenced her to probation, community service, full restitution, and a restraining order keeping her 500 yards from my property. But the real justice came from watching my community heal. Janet Rivera proved to be everything Dee wasn't: transparent, fair, and actually interested in serving homeowners instead of terrorizing them. The new board adopted what residents started calling Tank's rules: mandatory public hearings before any fines, written documentation for all violations, and an appeals process that didn't require hiring lawyers. My memorial garden rose from the ashes more beautiful than ever. Neighbors volunteered their weekends to help replant, donate materials, and rebuild what Dee's revenge had destroyed. Mrs. Alvarez brought heirloom rose cuttings from her grandmother's garden. Maria Torres designed a new irrigation system twice as efficient as the old one. Mike Torres and his teenage son rebuilt the memorial bench with cedar that would last decades. But the community did something that brought tears to my eyes. They insisted on adding a plaque dedicating the garden to all military spouses who support their veterans' healing journey. Emily would have loved that. The financial reckoning was swift and brutal. Dee's homeowner's insurance denied all claims because her actions constituted criminal behavior. The $9,200 in damages came straight from their personal assets, along with my legal fees and emotional distress compensation. Their house sold at a $82,000 loss. Apparently living next to a revenge party crime scene hurts property values. The legal precedent made waves across Texas. Jake started getting calls from other HOA abuse victims, and he launched a specialty practice helping homeowners fight corrupt board members. My case became required reading in several law schools, as an example of how documentation and patience can defeat even the most determined suburban tyrants. 6 months later, I established the Emily Harlan Memorial Scholarship for military families pursuing degrees in horticulture or agriculture therapy. The seed money came from my settlement with Dee, and the annual fundraiser happens right here in the Memorial Garden every spring. This year's first recipient was Maria Torres's niece, a young woman studying therapeutic gardening for PTSD treatment. Emily would have been proud to help launch that career. The national impact surprised me. Military publications featured my story as an example of standing up to discrimination. I testified before the Texas legislature about HOA accountability, helping pass stronger protections for military families. The Homeowner Bill of Rights law now requires HOA boards to undergo bias training and follow due process before imposing fines. But the most satisfying change was personal. My garden became the neighborhood gathering place. Kids picking cherry tomatoes with permission. Elderly neighbors stopping for morning coffee on the memorial bench. New military families getting advice about dealing with difficult neighbors. I even got a call from another veteran in Florida facing similar HOA harassment involving his service dog. Guess I'm expanding my consulting services to help military families fight suburban dictators nationwide. 3 months ago, I received an unexpected visitor. Dee's hedge fund husband. He looked tired, older, carrying the weight of being married to someone whose hatred had destroyed their life. I wanted to apologize, he said quietly, and to tell you something. Dee's getting therapy now, court-ordered, but she's finally dealing with whatever made her like that. I appreciated the gesture, but some bridges burn too completely to rebuild. He moved to Colorado after their divorce finalized. Dee disappeared entirely, probably started over somewhere that doesn't Google criminal records. Their old house was bought by a young military couple with 2 kids and dreams of a big garden. Perfect karma. As I finish this story, I'm sitting on Emily's memorial bench, watching sunrise paint my tomatoes gold, listening to mockingbirds call from the oak trees, breathing the sweet scent of roses she never got to see bloom. So tell me, was I wrong to let those buses roll in and gather the evidence that finally took her down? Or was the real crime letting a power-hungry HOA Karen run wild in the first place? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm collecting HOA nightmare stories, and maybe we can help you find justice too. If this tale of suburban revenge fired you up, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell. More neighborhood takedowns are coming. Stay vigilant out there.